This is a Boss ME-6B based multiple effects processor. It was made in 1992 and made in Japan. This video is just going to cover the basics on how to navigate this unit and the basics on some of the effects as well. This is not a review of the Exprssion pedal, the tuner, the power supply and master switch, the foot switch, my bass, my amp, or my playing. Again, it's just a basic overview for those who have had this unit and maybe would like a little bit of help visually. I know I'm a visual learner, so it helps sometimes when I can have something walked through. So I thought maybe this can help some folks. I'm actually doing this video as an aid to a friend of mine who's a bass player, and he just picked up this unit recently, and I think this will be really great to kind of help get folks started on this machine. Thankfully, it's intuitive enough for anyone to play around with it if you have the time, but hopefully some of the things I'll explain will maybe tap into other things you may not have already been aware of. Now note, you do not need anything other than this unit to work the unit. You don't need the Exprssion pedal or the foot switch. However, this unit does not have a tuner. So that's why I have this here. And I'll talk more about the tuner and how to connect it in just a moment. That said, this here is called the power supply and master switch. All this is helping me to confirm that I have what's called unity gain in my setup. What unity gain is the same volume you have plugged directly into the amp from the instrument is the same volume as if the unit were in line. Why that's important is because it gives me an idea of what I want to do with the effects and how they sit in the mix and how much low end I'm able to retain and how much signal and all that. So green means that it's bypassing. It's going right from the bass out to the amp. Red means it's in line. So let's get a quick sound check and bounce between the two modes to make sure I have the same volume. Please pardon the sound. I'm not hooked up to any interface. This is just the amp in the room, and it's a basic setup, so the sound might not be awesome, but it's just to give you an idea. If there is a difference at all, it is barely noticeable, so I'm going to call that unity gain. So we are good. Moving on, let's go through some of the connections and then we'll go through the panel. In the back, you've got a 1/4 inch input for the instrument. You've got the tuner out. So this only sends a signal out for a tuner. Notice I don't have anything hooked up over here. So whatever tuner you have, because by the way, it does not have to be a Boss Exprssion pedal. It does not have to be a Boss tuner, Boss switch, or Boss foot switch for however you want to do your gear. This will accept others as long as you have your connections correct. So this is sending a signal out to the tuner, so the tuner, whatever tuner you have, must always be on. Otherwise it won't receive a signal. So one thing to keep in mind, one of the beauties of having a tuner is to be able to mute and tune on stage. This setup will not do that. If you want to use this tuner to be able to mute, it needs to go before the ME-6B or after. That's just the way it was made back in '92. I don't see it as a huge inconvenience because you can also hook up the Exprssion pedal and mute with the Exprssion pedal. If you don't have it though, you would definitely need to hook it up before or after. My humble opinion, I would prefer to hook it up after so that if there's any other trouble in the chain, I can mute that, fix my trouble in the chain, go back and unmute it and keep playing. The downside to that is that if you have any any time-based effects like reverb or delay, they will cut off unnaturally with the mute. If you have your time-based effects after the muting, you have a natural decay of the effects. More on that later. So again, input, tuner out, Left and right outputs typically go left mono, but it does have the option for stereo. You have an 1/8 inch headphones out. You've got your Exprssion pedal connection. Note this on the Exprssion pedal if you get one. You will need to get a TRS cable or tip ring sleeve. So typical patch cables will have, sorry about that, typical patch cables will have one little ring. See that one red ring? They're sometimes black. This has two. 1, 2. It's tip ring sleeve. It's called TRS or tip ring sleeve. So you will need that to hook up your Exprssion pedal in order for it to work. Let's put that back in. Full volume. Mute. Now, I'll explain where this is in line with the effects later on. But completing the inputs in the back, you've got a foot switch connection for your manual mode and a foot switch connection for your bypass mode. Now, what manual and bypass modes are, manual means you go from operating this unit as a bank and patch system, because this unit has 25 user editable patches, 5 banks with 5 patches on each bank. I'll explain that later. Or you can go to manual mode, either by the foot switch, or you can even just press the button. You don't need the foot switch. This just makes it easier for gigs because you have it at your feet. And then this turns into a row of stomp boxes. Now that is absolutely my preferred way to go, but to each their own. So that's the manual. And bypass is exactly what you would think. It takes whatever sound you have going on, and with the flick of a switch goes right to your bypass bass sound. So you have the buttons here, but having the foot switch or any unlatched foot switch just makes it so that you have access to it on the fly, at your feet, at gigs without having to bend down. And then the last connection is just your power adapter. As long as you meet the power requirements of this unit and the right barrel connection and the right polarity, you do not need to get the original Boss adapter, but I would absolutely recommend it if you're able to. The instruction manual, again, I'll leave a link to that in the description, has the power requirements for this unit. So you should be able to find one relatively easily on Amazon or in the used market, or even a genuine Boss one if someone has one for sale on eBay. So now that we've gone over all the connections, let's go over the banks and patches. So again, 25 patches, 5 patches over 5 banks. Right now, we are in bank 1, and this lit button here under the number 1 means that we're in patch 1. And you can switch between these simply by pressing these buttons when you're in bank patch mode. You can tell that you're there because this manual isn't lit up. If manual's lit up, you're in the row of stomp boxes. Let's go back here. So I'm gonna do a quick sound check so that you can get a quick sample of what these sound like. Again, pardon the audio, but it's just to kind of help the newcomer how to navigate this. Okay, so I've gone through all 5 patches in bank 1, but now how do I get to bank 2? Oh, this button here has a B. So in bank patch mode, B is bank. So that's how you switch between banks. And the way you do that is you hit the bank button, it flashes. So that's saying, hey, change me to where you want me to go. You can't do it with this or this. So the way it works is you have the bank button pressed, it's flashing. You go to the bank you want to go to by selecting one of these buttons. So I want to go to bank 2. Now I'm in bank 2, and now this is flashing. Select the patch you want to go to. Because we're going in order, we'll just go to patch 1. So now we're in bank 2, patch 1. Sound test again. Now I want to go go to bank 3, hit bank 3, patch 1. Bank 4, patch 1. And then finally bank 5, patch 1. And then if you want, back to patch 1, bank 1, and that's where I have my edited patch, even though I did not really do very much. And again, I prefer using it as a row of stomp boxes. But that row of stomp boxes is saved to bank 1, patch 1. So guess what? You can use it in bank patch mode and just call up sounds that come up automatically. Or if you want to use it as a row of stomp boxes, save it to a patch. And then you have 25 different options for rows of stomp boxes with different settings that you could save to each. So given the age of this unit, that's really, really cool. Definitely usable even in 2022 and, you know, forever. It makes it timeless. Like any effects unit really, but just amazing that they were able to do this back in 1992. So that said, one quick life hack for the gigging musician. If you decide you want to do patches and banks as the way you use this machine, always have your bypass at the ready for your clean sound. And on your set list, maybe write down something like B number, P number to help you remember which bank and patch you may have edited for songs. The reason why that is because the likelihood is high that from one gig to the next, the set list is going to change. You don't want to chase the set list by changing this setup every time. So go ahead and edit all of your 25 patches or even just one or however many. Edit as you like them. And when you see the set list, just give a quick jot down with a Sharpie next to the song name with the bank and patch that you have. So for example, this would be B1, P1. You know, B3, P4 for bank 3, patch 4, however you want to do it. But that's just a quick tip for those that are gigging musicians and that are new to the whole thing. Anyway, let's move over to manual mode. So manual mode, again, is now a row of stomp boxes. I have them all off because I saved them that way. One quick note on the manual mode, notice at the B, I wrote reverb and delay here because B, that becomes reverb and delay in the manual mode. So let's go through the effects really fast. You have compressor enhancer, you've got overdrive or distortion, you've got synth bass, equalizer, a noise suppressor, and notice that this is gray because it has no switch, chorus flanger, reverb and delay, and master, again, gray because it has no switch. You control all the parameters right here. So the yellow corresponds to where there's a foot switch, right? So compressor enhancer, overdrive distortion, synth bass, equalizer, chorus flanger, reverb and delay. You notice that this is a spreadsheet or a matrix, and you notice another smaller spreadsheet or matrix over here. This is a spreadsheet of all of the parameters that you can change for each of the effects, and it's, you know, columns and rows. So for this column is all the compression options you have, for an enhancer rather. The settings that you can change. You can change all the settings here for your distortions and your synth bass and equalizer, so forth and so on. You've got this cursor up here that helps you navigate through all of them, right? Noise suppressor and master will never blink. They will always stay on unless you're on them and editing them. That's just because there's no way to turn off with this foot switch. It's really no big deal at all. It's irrelevant. So you have this D-pad to go across the columns, and then you also have these rows to get to each of the rows. So if you're right now we're on compression sustainer, compressor enhancer, and you're in the first row. And you can change your parameters by the value up, value down button. So as you notice, 0 through 15 here, 15 is a max, 0 is the minimum. You'll notice that each will correspond to wherever you are. And it's the same thing going all the way across the board. So if you want to edit, the way you do that is, well, before I get there, this matrix here explains all of the available effects in the unit. So if you want to edit an effect, let's go ahead and play with overdrive distortion for a moment. So right now, it's blinking because it's not engaged. Let's engage it so that we can hear it as we're editing it, okay? So you've got overdrive distortion. You've got 3 different modes to select from. First is the overdrive, pretty light overdrive. Second is distortion 1. Third is distortion 2. And they naturally, they increase in intensity as you go up. Moving down, you have drive. So this is like any effects pedal. How much drive do you want in it? Maybe you want no drive or very little drive. So you can change that to taste like any effects pedal. And it's as simple as that. You just navigate through and toggle up and down. So this is your navigation, and this is what how you actually change the parameters. Navigation, parameters. Let's say you like what you saved. You want to hit right copy. Hit right copy, you'll see the little edit that it's ready to go ahead and copy it. It's in bank 1, patch 1, where I have my row of stomp boxes that I've been working on. I go ahead and hit right copy. The flashing stops after a quick second and it's saved. So now I'm at my row of stomp boxes. I'm happy, yes. Whoa, wait a minute. I got to the gig and I got to my row of stomp boxes. Why is my distortion automatically on? Because when I saved it with the pedal engaged. So my preference, if I'm gonna use a row of stomp boxes on how I'm gonna use this unit and I wanna save the settings, I want to keep the settings there, but turn the effect off. Hit right copy, it's at my desired bank. Now, when I go back to my row of stomp boxes, they're all off. So another quick life hack for the gigging musician so that you're not surprised. And that's how you edit all of the effects. You can go up and down and change each of the parameters. So again, D-pad parameters. So now let's talk about the noise suppressor for a second, because you'll notice that the effects are in a certain order. This happens to be a generally accepted order of the effects. And the reason why that's significant is because if you were to turn all of these effects on at the same time, which you can do, you just kind of want to watch for some of the settings that they're not too drastic. But if you were to turn all of them on, they play nicely with each other in this way. And I'll give you a quick example. It's not common that you want a reverb or delay to be before a distortion. Usually you want that to be the ambience that colors the overdrive distortion and not the other way around. So starting from the beginning with the compressor sustainer, you use that to level out your playing or your levels, but you can also use that to help maybe better push a clean, solid signal to your following effects, be it the overdrive and the synth bass, or just a synth bass, because synth bass can be finicky. And you know, if you spend a lot of time on synth bass and you feel like you're not happy, try adding a little compression beforehand, and try also playing with a little bit of the EQ afterward. And you can add some color, but synth bass is a really funny thing because it can be very easily overlooked, because when you're playing with them, initially you're thinking, why do I want all these laser sounds and these weird space age sounds? It's not applicable in a set. Probably not. But what is applicable is those effects depending on how you play them. So that's something where I would encourage you to really spend some time with it and do your research. And when you're trying different effects out, play differently. Don't just, you want to give different values. So I'll turn on the synth bass for a moment. Where am I ever going to use that fart noise? I don't know. But maybe if I play higher in the neck, it'll sound different. So it sounds a little funky when you first use it, but if you give different values to the notes and listen to the different ways that the envelope will actually open and close, And you can play with those parameters. That might make it a bit more palatable and even usable at a gig and for your creative situation. So I really encourage you to go ahead and really spend some time playing with some of the effects and how they work with each other. Because if you don't like one, for example, you get a distortion that like, oh, that could sound really cool, but it sounds so muffled. Well, EQ it here and add EQ here. And it's great that it's afterwards. So just, I don't want to spend too much time on the effects, but I wanted to give those basics for someone who's just getting into effects and really experimenting with them. When it comes to the order, right? Compressor, overdrive, synth bass, equalizer, noise suppressor. This is here for a very good reason. The noise suppressor acts as a way to clamp down on any extra noise or hiss when the note is meant to be silent. So if you really like playing with distortion and you've got a couple of parts in a song that need a couple of stops or rests, well, you don't want to have to turn the distortion on and off of those rests. You want to just mute the strings naturally, right? And when you do that, unless you like having the feedback and it's part of the sound, rock and roll. But maybe you want to ease the hiss when you're not supposed to be having a note played. That's where the noise suppressor comes in. And you want to set that to taste. And a good way to test that is have the distortion effect sound on, and you'll be hearing some hiss from the amp. And while you're hearing that hiss from the amp, you come here and turn the noise suppressor level up or down. Down if you want less extreme noise suppression, 0 if you want the noise suppressor off. And all the way to the top if you want it to be clamped as much as possible. But keep in mind that when you have the noise suppressor all the way up, you're gonna wind up unnaturally decaying your note. So let's ring out a note really quick, but then listen for where it's gonna unnaturally cut off. It unnaturally cut off. That's really hard to hear, but the string was still ringing and vibrating. So I wanted to catch that. If you lower the noise suppressor, the remaining natural sound will come through because it's no longer clamping down as hard. So this is something where you're gonna want to, I think the best way to handle a noise suppressor is you get all the sound that you want, that you really like, and then tame it afterward with this, because this is not something that colors your sound. It's meant to control your sound. So keep that in mind. Another note about the placement is that Boss very smartly put the modulation and time bass effects after the noise suppressor. But not only that, the volume pedal that we talked about earlier, this is also where it is in a chain. So the chain is 1, 2, 3, 4, noise suppressor, volume, then modulation, time-based effects. The reason why that is absolutely awesome is because if you have, let's say, a reverb and delay on, and let's throw on a distortion just to kind of really get the audio to come through. So you hear that reverb. I intentionally made it very, very, very long so that you can hear what it's like when you swell with the volume pedal. So the fact that the delay is after where the volume pedal is placed makes it so much more usable because you can have the decays and the reverbs cut off naturally. Moving on, you've got your modulation and your reverb and delay, self-explanatory, and then your master. So a note about the master, that is basically where you control the master volume of the unit. I like to keep it at 50 and then adjust everything else around that because again, I've established unity gain. So having this at 50 with nothing on is just like I'm going right through to the amp. For me. You may have a different setup. And this is something I should have explained earlier and I forgot and I apologize. I'll explain that now. When you hit bypass, it doesn't really sound like it's at 50. It's a little lower. So let's listen to that for a second. Let's get the bypass off. So you hear it's a little bit lower. It's not the best quality because again, it's an amp in the room. But if you find that that's the case for you, this is your opportunity to ensure that you have unity gain with bypass, and that is absolutely the best place to start. Go to bypass, go to your master, try 45. It sounds like for me, 43 is even better. For you, it will be different. That's kind of the point. I should have led with that, but I think in going through all of them, it was good to finally come back to this and mention it now. So I'll go ahead and save that for me because that actually works really well. None of my effects are on. I'm already gonna save to bank 1, patch 1. Done. Now, let's see what that sounds like if I go back over here. What do you know? For me, this is the ideal setup for unity gain. So it will differ for you, but I would say that that's where you want to start, and then start tweaking the effects around that, around your dry signal. Because when you go to bypass, if you have a master volume setting that doesn't match it, at a gig where you try to go bypass and get your natural full bass sound in, it might be thin. So keep that in mind. The next thing on the master, let's go back to manual. On the master is the input attenuator. It's sometimes also called a pad. It's sometimes found on a DI, actually it's found on almost every DI box I've ever seen, every direct box, and also some amplifiers have it as well. An input attenuator helps for when you have a really high output bass. If for some reason you're playing a bass that has a high output and you hear a little bit of distortion or clipping, that's where you come to here and use the input attenuator. There are 2 settings for the input attenuator. There's 0, which means flat, not affected, and there's -6 decibels. So it lowers it by 6 decibels so that this way your bass can be a little bit lower and it won't clip or distort anything. So let's see what that sounds like. It should just be a volume cut. Hear that? Volume cut. And it's as simple as that. It's a great utility to have on hand, depending on the basses you have. So set that up to taste as well, again, depending on your setup. So I do believe that that is the basics for this unit in navigating it. I am not a content creator. Again, I'm not paid by Boss or anyone. I'm just a musician that happens to have some gear. I'm an active musician. I wanted to help a friend out who just scored this machine. I do not need you to follow me, but you're of course more than welcome to, because it's always nice to have people to talk to in the comment section. So if you think of anything I may have missed, please put it in the comments. Let's help each other out for folks that might be wanting to use this machine, because these can be gotten for pretty cheap and they're actually still really fantastic. Note that it is made of plastic, but yes, it is gig worthy as long as you're not stepping on it with a pickup truck. It's still Boss. The sound quality is very good. It's a lot of fun to work with. You'll want to get some of these extra enhancements to it, but you don't need to. I do ask that you like the video. Again, not for me, but just so that it helps spread the word to others that are looking for this machine. I don't know when the next video I'll put up is. I really don't do this very often, but I hope that this helps somebody. I hope you find your sound and you have a great time with this thing. It's an awesome unit. Thanks everyone. Stay happy, stay healthy, and stay active in music.